Very weird, very big moment for me. I have a trilogy out. And this third book, Million Eyes 3, is the culmination of almost 15 years worth of work now. I was fresh out of uni when the ideas for this came to me, and it was just less than a year later that I sat down with Vicky and I went through my ideas and I said, yeah, I think I'm going to scrap it all. And Vicky said to me, well, that's dumb, and basically told me, you have something here, and helped me hone the ideas into something workable, because it was a little bit overstuffed at that point. So I said at my very first book launch, we're all here because of Vicky, because I would have given up on it if she hadn't been so enthusiastic about it. So in the last 15 years, so much has changed for me, so it is very weird that I've been working on this for this long. I qualified as a criminal lawyer, I then got made redundant, I tried employment law, hated it, quit my job, took up freelance writing full time. I've lived in 5 different places, I think, since then. After uni, I was back home with mum. Then I moved in with 3 of my college friends for a few years. Then I lived with one of my favourite people in the universe, Fabs, in Aldershot. Then I had my flat in Hazelmere. And finally, the first house I've ever owned here in Clanfield. In the last few years, I've secured my favourite job I've ever had at Old Street Solutions, and I have one of my colleagues here, but I can't see him. He is definitely here somewhere. Oh, he's over there, Ben. And I also met the woman I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. Who proposed to me in a hot air balloon last July, and it was something I wasn't expecting at all, because she very shrewdly conspired with Vicky and Pip to make me think that the hot air balloon ride was a gift from them for doing a speech at their wedding. I guess she knows I love a conspiracy. So in all that time, all the different places I've been and been living, I have been writing Million Eyes, and rewriting it, and rewriting it. I've been submitting it to agents, getting rejected, submitting it to publishers, getting rejected. I submitted it to one publisher who laid into it so much that I nearly threw it in the bin. But I did then run their feedback past my writers group, and they told me that they were talking out their rear ends, shall we say. So yeah, I didn't take that feedback too much to heart in the end. And yeah, so it's been a long journey. It's been very fun, because I obviously love writing, but at times it's not so fun, obviously. So I'm assuming most of you here have read the first book, but or the second as well, probably. But if you haven't, then the Million Eyes books are about a global tech corporation that are secretly time travellers on the side. In book 1, we have 2 characters, Gregory Ferro and Jennifer Larson, who stumble upon evidence that this corporation, called Million Eyes, has been tampering with history, and that certain events in our history, the death of Princess Diana, the disappearance of the princes in the tower, many others, were influenced by Million Eyes. And then in the second book, we have 2 different characters, Adam Bryant and Samantha Lester. They join forces to take down Million Eyes after Lester discovers an impossible archaeological discovery in East London. And in the meantime, Million Eyes themselves, they are having to deal with a mysterious character called the Unraveller, where the title comes from. And this person is deliberately tampering with certain events in history. Marty, see you enter. And Yeah, so in the second book we learn that Millie and I have been involved in even more events in our history. The extinction of the dinosaurs, the gunpowder plot, the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. I tried to throw everything in. And then in the third book, Ouroboros, all these strands come together. And the story comes full circle. And this focuses on two different characters again. One is a woman in the 23rd century, Cara Montgomery, who has to make some hard decisions after the Earth is invaded by a malevolent alien race called the Shapeless. And then the other main character is Harriet Turner, a woman in the 19th century, who is on the trail of Jack the Ripper. Eventually, these two women, separated by 3 centuries, come together in the fight against Millie and I. And in particular, the main villain in all 3 books, Miss Morgan, the CEO of Millie and I. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about Miss Morgan, because she is my favourite of all the characters, because she's the villain. And anybody who knows me well and knows my writing well knows that I love the villains. Sometimes more than the heroes. In Star Wars, my favourite character is Emperor Palpatine. I think he's great. And Miss Morgan, she is inspired mainly by 2 characters. I don't know how many of you are Prison Break fans, but if anybody remembers season 1 and 2 of Prison Break, the main villain was Caroline Reynolds. She was the evil vice president who was pulling all the strings of the conspiracy that landed Lincoln Burrows in jail. And she was very slowly revealed to the viewer over the course of season 1. So I had her in my mind as I was writing Miss Morgan. Also, Patty Hughes, played by Glenn Close in Damages. Perhaps you watched that with me. She was another big inspiration as well. So, another thing to mention about Millie and I's 3 is that it's the most female-driven of all the books. I tried to have a balance in books 1 and 2. I was a bit more constrained because I had a lot of historical characters I needed to incorporate, and you know, a lot of those happen to be men. But Millie and I's 3, a lot more of it is set in the future than the past, so I had more freedom. The reason this is important to me is because all the genres that have inspired Millie and I, so sci-fi, thrillers, action, conspiracy, they're all very male-dominated. And Dan Brown, I like Dan Brown, and the Da Vinci Code is a big inspiration for Millie and I. He is notorious for having like a token woman in amongst a cast full of men. And a lot of the sci-fi that I have watched and loved over the years has tended to have 1 or 2 women in the cast and then like 6 or 7 men. And I kind of wanted to turn that around a bit. I just have never really understood why that is the case. So I've definitely made an effort to have the most female characters in book 3. So I've completed Millie and I's now, and I guess the question is, where do I go from here? I'm about a third of the way through a crime horror novel called The Puddle Bumps. This focuses on a criminal defence lawyer. I thought it was maybe time that I started using some of my experiences as a lawyer in my writing. Julie, I think you suggested this to me years ago, that I start including my experiences as a lawyer. And the lawyer character, she basically discovers, she finds this videotape in her dad's attic, sort of an old TV show from the 80s, an old kids show, and then she starts having flashes of this violent episode that never aired. So she starts investigating, eventually discovers a link to one of her old murder cases, is ultimately led to this mysterious town called Dares Hill, where nothing is what it seems. I'm also working on a collaborative novel with Katie called Breaching the Wall. This is a sci-fi, conspiracy, adventure, comedy, mystery, everything basically. and this is about a team of scientists who are tasked with solving the mystery of the universal limit, which is an immense wall that surrounds the universe and has started to close in, crashing into planets and stars and wiping out life. And these scientists are tasked with either stopping the wall from closing in or finding a way through it. Of course, again, nothing is what it seems, and there are villains lurking in their midst. I really do like it when things aren't what they seem. So that's my writing. I just want to say thank you, firstly to my sister, because at the last 2 book launches she was desperate for a shout out. That's not the only reason, obviously. I love you. I love how close we are. Maybe not when you were a teenager. But no, you've always supported me through everything. So thank you. Mum and Dad, you've obviously been on this journey with me the longest. I've been writing. Well, I've been wanting to make books since before I could write. Mm-hmm. So 4-year-old me drafted in Mum as my ghostwriter. And I still have a very clear memory of the very first book we made together.
Oh, gosh.
And I've actually brought it along. It's called Christopher's Book. It's just to show that everybody starts somewhere. But yeah, so I couldn't write then. So Mum did all the words, I did the pictures. And yeah, so feel free to have a look at that, it's quite amusing. But yeah, I remember how excited I was to show Dad when he came home from work. Yeah, and Dad, of course, my love of sci-fi and time travel comes from you. We both have the same favourite episode of Star Trek, which is Yesterday's Enterprise. I don't know how many nerdy people are familiar with this. But it's possibly the best time travel story ever, I would say. So yes, thank you both, Mum and Dad, for all your support over the years. I next want to thank Elsewhen Press, because they've made me a published author. Yeah, your support over the years now has been invaluable. Elsewhen Press have actually published 5 of my books. There's obviously 3 here, but they've also published 2 short story collections as ebooks as well. So Million Eyes Extra Time and Million Eyes Overtime. I'd actually, if you're running out of, if you want more Million Eyes in your life after you've read these books, then I would encourage you to download those. They're free to download. But I'd actually encourage you to read the short stories before Ouroboros, just because they lend a bit more context to Ouroboros. Yeah, you won't be lost reading the trilogy without having read the short stories, but it might just be a bit more rewarding. So yeah, finally, I just want to thank you all for coming, and all of you you've all supported me over the years with my writing, given me feedback when I've needed it, bought my books, told other people to buy my books. And these book launches have been the best nights of my life, and it's because of all of you. So thank you, and I'm going to sign some books now, and I think there's lots of food still to go, so enjoy, and thank you all for coming here. I've been talking for so long that I forgot that I was meant to do a reading as well. So, you know, the main thing that you might want to actually hear. So, yes. So it's a kind of a standalone chapter of Million Eyes 3, but it shows the lengths that Million Eyes will go to get what they want. And it's chapter 11. It's set on August the 23rd, 2037. It was a hot Sunday afternoon in the village of Llanderi in West Wales, and most of its 500 residents were either working up a tan in their gardens or sheltering in their air-conditioned homes and avoiding the sun altogether. Jake Cotler, his 2 years younger sister Gretel, and their friends Billy, Aaron and Pablo were on the village green having a water fight, all armed with various types and sizes of water guns, and running around laughing and screaming. Jake, however, was starting to feel a tad frustrated. He had a Super Saturator Double Soakage 3000, and Pablo only had a Drench Nation Floodinator X2. Yet Pablo had one wet sleeve, and Jake felt like he'd been dumped in a lake. It was because Pablo was so short and skinny and ran like a whippet. Jake had to get him. There was no way he was letting Pablo win, not again. Pausing from soaking the others, Jake fixed his eyes on Pablo, who kept sneaking behind trees, hedges and benches on the green, and mounting surprise attacks while the others were distracted. I know your game, fool. You won't defeat me so easily. While Billy and Gretel chased each other around the duck pond and the war memorial, Jake used a succession of subtle gestures and nods to call a temporary truce with Aaron and instigate a silent conspiracy to turn the tables on their true enemy. Guns poised, they started to approach Pablo from opposite sides. We have you now, Pablo. Prepare for maximum soakination. Then, before they'd even got close, the sneaky little pipsqueak scurried between them and unleashed a torrent of water on his sister. Jake, Gretel, called their dad from the path skirting the green, heading for the village shop on the corner. Do you want ice cream? They were in the middle of a crucial battle, but a chocolate whippy with sprinkles and a flake seemed an excellent reason for a ceasefire. Yes, please, Jake and Gretel shouted in unison. Jake glanced back at Pablo, who grinned evilly at him. To be honest, he and Aaron still had a chance to get him before Dad bought their ice creams. Guys, look, cried Billy. Jake turned. Billy was staring skywards and Jake followed his gaze. A strange silver object, shaped like a giant jelly bean, hovered in the sky behind the Half Moon Inn. Other people on the village green had noticed it too and were staring and pointing. What is it? Said Pablo, lowering his floodinator. Now would have been a great time to drench him, but Jake was more interested in the object. I think it's one of those new drones, said Jake. The Seed, it's called. I saw it on the news. It's the fastest ever and has a stealth field that makes it invisible to sensors and a positronic supercomputer. Jake was a bit of a nerd when it came to drone tech. Cool, said Gretel. What's it doing here, said Aaron. Good question. Suddenly, as the children stared, a compartment opened in the belly of the Seed, and an ominous ball with deep vertical grooves and a glowing red hole at the centre emerged slightly from the craft, like a red eye opening and popping out. It didn't do that on the news, said Jake. I wonder if it's... Gretel started. Her sentence cut off as an enormous red beam of light surged out of the eye of the Seed and blasted the ground somewhere behind the Half Moon Inn, probably close to Bryn Jones' farm on Carmarthen Lane. A chorus of gasps and cries rippled across the green. A moment later, the beam stopped, and Jake could no longer remember Bryn Jones' farm, or Bryn Jones' wife, or children, or cows. There was no farm in Llanderi. Heart pounding, Jake froze where he stood as a gauzy red haze spread past the Half Moon Inn, all the houses either side of it, and Llanderi Methodist Church. For a moment, all the buildings caught inside the haze looked fuzzy and blurry, and then they vanished, all of them gone. Jake blinked. A moment of dizziness made him sway and totter slightly. He blinked again and straightened. Llanderi had never had a pub or a church, too small for either. It was a hamlet, not a village. Only 200 people lived there. Jake knew that. Jake had always known that. Like a red tidal wave, the huge mist wafted towards Jake and the others on the green, scooping up houses as it went, houses that were never there. Jake's father had already come out of the village shop with Jake's and Gretel's ice creams. The mist rolling towards him, he dropped the ice creams, which splattered in the road, and hurtled towards his children. Then the mist enveloped the shop. Llanderi had never had a shop. A hamlet with only 70 people didn't need a shop. The red wave approaching the duck pond and the war memorial on the green, Gretel broke her awestruck stare and bolted towards Jake. But the mist devoured the duck pond and the war memorial, and then it got her. Jake was an only child. He'd always wanted a little sister. His racing heart slowed to a steady thud, then a laboured crawl. He looked up to see his dad tearing towards him, and in that moment, it seemed like he was running in slow motion. Jake looked down at his supersaturator. Maybe Dad will have a water fight with me. Water fights are no fun on your own, and I'm the only kid my age in Llanderi. His dad reached him and stooped to fold him tightly into his arms, just as the red mist enshrouded them both, pulling them into a dark oblivion. Dr. Neither watched her video feed in the redactor chamber at Facility 9 with clenched fists, a stiff jaw, and welded shut lips, as the red beam surged into the Llanderi focal point, causing a temporal shockwave to propagate through the small West Wales village. Temporal incursion in progress, her colleague said, and Dr. Neither swallowed. Please work. The red wave eradicated a farm, houses, roads, a pub, a church, and a village shop from history, transforming Llanderi into open meadows and woodlands. Dr. Neither felt her shoulders loosen, although it wasn't time to celebrate yet. After so many years, she knew the dangers of premature optimism more than most. Temporal incursion complete, said her colleague, as Dr. Neither watched the red wave dissipate into shimmering shreds of cloud scudding over fields and the tops of trees. Dr. Neither nodded tentatively. Run a sensor sweep. Confirm full erasure. Her colleague activated the sensor grid on the scene and probed the now wild and uninhabited countryside where Llanderi had once stood. Several minutes later, full erasure confirmed. All humans and man-made objects have been eradicated. Counter impacts? Her colleague read off his computer console. None. All collateral impacts are within our projections. No damage to Million Eyes or any of our key people. Dr. Neither blew out the sigh of relief she'd been holding in. Power down the seed and lower the shield. Make a note in the log that the large-scale test was successful. We now have a viable weapon against the shapeless. So that's it. So yes, hopefully none of you have fallen asleep or anything, because I've been talking for what seems like hours. So I'll leave you be now, and hope it's served drinks and food, and I'll sign some books for you. Thank you very much.